They tried to erase her with a signature, but in the wreckage of their betrayal, she found the power to rewrite the legacy they built on lies. Jasmine Johnson isn't here to inherit, she's here to expose, reclaim, and build a legacy rooted in truth, no matter how deep she has to dig. Jasmine Johnson stood one step from her father's study door when his voice froze her in place. Not angry, just certain. Your sister. She's not getting a single thing. She's out. The hallway around her turned cold, not the kind of cold from air conditioning, but the kind that wraps around your bones when you realize something is about to change forever. She could have walked in. She could have said something, but she didn't. Through the crack in the door, she saw Robert Johnson, her father, leaning back in his chair, speaking to her younger sister Emily, who nodded in silence. Behind them, her mother Susan stood with arms crossed and a smile that wasn't kind, a smile that said it had all worked. Jasmine's feet carried her away from that door, not consciously, but with the weight of betrayal pressing her forward, past her old bedroom, into the guest room she had been staying in. She sat at the desk, opened her laptop, and moved every cent from her savings and investment accounts into a private fund they didn't know existed, one she had opened years ago on a gut instinct she never fully understood. What they didn't know was that she knew about the second trust, the one her grandmother Eleanor had created before her death, the one that had just matured, and it wasn't small. She didn't cry that night. She didn't scream or throw anything. She just stared at the screen, watching the transfer confirmation, feeling something inside her shift. She wasn't their daughter anymore. She was the obstacle they didn't think could fight back, and that was going to be their second mistake. Looking back, she realized it hadn't started with that conversation. They had been erasing her long before they said it aloud. There was the Christmas photo her mother sent out, captioned Johnson family full of love, in which Jasmine was conspicuously absent despite flying in days before and doing all the work that made the holiday possible. She remembered baking pies from scratch while Susan hummed in the kitchen, orchestrating every move like a director in a play. She wrapped gifts until her fingers cramped, each ribbon tied perfectly. But when she asked about the family photo, Susan's answer was casual, dismissive. "Oh honey, we took it while you were out running errands. Just slipped my mind." It didn't slip her mind. It was deliberate, a small erasure meant to feel like an oversight. Their father, always pragmatic and always controlling, had begun a steady campaign of undermining her. "You're too emotional to handle estate business," he said one evening over dinner, setting down his wine glass with that authoritative finality that closed conversations. "This stuff needs a rational head." Rational, as if caring was irrational. As if staying up through nights at the hospital meant she was unstable. Emily, her sister by for years, had become distant. She still sent texts, but only when she needed something. A scanned document, a favor, a loan. Her tone was breezy, pretending they were still close, but the warmth was gone, replaced with transactional. Nesrian, their cousin who had grown up in their house after his parents' divorce, was perhaps the most blatant. He had started calling her the martyr, always with a grin, as if the word was a compliment, but it landed like a blade. "You're always sacrificing, Jas. It's your thing." She thought it was harmless teasing until it wasn't yet. She kept showing up. Jasmine had been there when Grandma Eleanor fell for the third time. She was there in the hospice room, reading to her with a voice that cracked from exhaustion. She had given up her consulting job, a lucrative contract with an international firm, to stay home and help Robert through his surgery. When Emily maxed out her credit cards, Jasmine paid the electric bill without a word. She covered for Ryan when his gambling debt spiraled again, using her emergency savings. They never said thank you, not once. They treated her sacrifices as obligations, as if her worth was defined by what she could give without expectation. But the real fracture came the night of the second conversation. It was late, the house steeped in that uneasy quiet that magnifies whispers. Jasmine was passing the study when she heard Robert's voice, crisp and decisive. "Don't tell her about the account. We'll say it was closed. Split it between us. Jasmine's out. She's been a burden long enough. Burden. The word was a scalpel. It sliced through years of silent endurance, exposing the raw truth beneath. She stood frozen in the hallway, not out of fear, but because a part of her still wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding. That maybe grief had warped their perception. But it wasn't grief. It was greed. Calculated and cold that night, as she sat alone, Jasmine remembered her grandmother's words from the hospice bed. Eleanor's voice was soft, raspy, yet piercing. One day, they'll turn on you. When they do, open the bottom drawer. She had said it with a look that lingered, a weight that Jasmine now understood. The drawer was in Eleanor's old bedroom, untouched since the funeral. It was an oak desk, sturdy and timeless, much like Eleanor herself. Jasmine's hands trembled as she opened it, expecting perhaps a keepsake, maybe a letter. But inside was a small flash drive, a folded letter written in Eleanor's unmistakable cursive, and a cream-colored envelope sealed with a notary-stamped letter was brief, but its impact was seismic. Jasmine, if you're reading this, they've already made their move. Blood doesn't make them worthy. Love doesn't make them loyal. Take what's yours and don't apologize. Grandma. 4 lines that anchored her in the middle of the storm. The envelope contained an amended will, signed, witnessed, notarized, and dated 2 weeks before Eleanor's death. Jasmine read every word meticulously. It granted her 51% control of the family business, power of attorney over Robert's trust, 2 rental properties in Colorado, and an investment account worth just over $1.2 million. Eleanor hadn't split things evenly. She hadn't played diplomat. She had chosen Jasmine, not out of favoritism, but out of recognition, because Jasmine had stayed, because she had listened, because she had held Eleanor's hand when it mattered. Jasmine sat with the envelope for hours, not moving, not crying, just absorbing the magnitude of what it meant. They wanted her erased. They wanted her compliance. But Eleanor had drawn a line. And on the side of truth, she had placed Jasmine. The next morning, the kitchen was a theater of false normalcy. Robert sat at the head of the table, flipping through financial reports. Emily was scrolling on her phone, chewing toast with casual indifference, and Susan was by the sink, stirring her tea with that same self-satisfied hum. Jasmine entered the room and placed the envelope gently on the table. Morning. She said. Robert didn't look up. We're busy, Jasmine. Can you give us a minute? She smiled, a practiced calm. Sure. Just wanted to say congrats. That got his attention. His eyes lifted, pen in hand, brows furrowed. On handing me everything, she said. Susan's hand jerked. Tea spilled across the counter, but she didn't wipe it. She just stared. What are you talking about? Susan asked, her voice sharp. Jasmine opened the envelope and slid the amended will onto the table, placing it squarely between Robert's coffee mug and the butter dish. Emily stopped scrolling. Robert stood slowly, reading the document's top line. His mouth opened, but no words followed. That's not, Susan began. Not real? Jasmine finished. Signed, notarized, witnessed. You remember Patricia, Grandma's church friend? She co-signed it 2 weeks before Grandma passed. Silence. Thick, suffocating. Guess she didn't trust the rest of you. Jasmine Sagerbert's voice was low, a growl more than words. You stole that. No, Jasmine replied, voice steady. I earned it. The silence stretched, an ugly pause that they could no longer fill with lies. They had underestimated her. They thought she would fade away quietly. They thought wrong. You thought I'd just go quietly, Jasmine continued. Let you erase me with a smile and a folded napkin at Thanksgiving. But you underestimated me. Robert stepped forward, finger raised, the familiar gesture of command. You listen to me, he began. No, Jasmine interrupted, louder now, but still calm. You listen. The account you tried to hide? Frozen. I had the bank investigate the moment I heard your little speech last night. Emily's face drained of color. What the hell is happening? Emily asked. Jasmine turned to her, voice soft but sharp. Your inheritance just slipped through your fingers. Susan's lip trembled. "This is your family." "No," Jasmine said. "This is a lesson." And with that, she turned and walked out, not running, not hiding, just claiming the ground they never thought she would stand on. They fracture had become a fault line. And it was only the beginning. Jasmine did not sleep the night after confronting her family. Sleep required peace, and peace had become a foreign concept. She lay on the guest bed, the glow of her laptop illuminating financial documents, legal statutes, and company bylaws. The weight of Eleanor's trust pressed against her like a silent hand on her shoulder. Jasmine knew she couldn't win this war with emotion. She had to be methodical, precise, and unrelenting. At dawn, she dressed in a tailored black suit, a quiet armor. As she drove toward the Johnson Industries office, the city outside, her car windows blurred. She wasn't returning as the overlooked daughter. Today, she was the rightful leader of a legacy they had tried to erase. The receptionist looked up, startled, as Jasmine walked through the glass doors with measured steps. There were no dramatic declarations, no stomping into rooms, just a slow, deliberate reclaiming of space. A boardroom had not changed since Jasmine's last visit. The same mahogany table that once dismissed her ideas now awaited her return. She remembered the last meeting she had attended years ago, offering suggestions for company outreach programs, only to be patronized and silenced. But today, the power dynamic had shifted. Today, they would list 10th board members filtered in, their faces composed yet uncertain. William, the long-serving CFO, adjusted his glasses nervously. Elizabeth, the legal counsel, avoided direct eye contact. Ryan, her cousin, strolled in with a swagger that rang hollow, his tailored blazer unable to mask the tension in his shoulder. Jasmine sat at the head of the table, spreading the ownership documents before her like a shield. Ryan sneered. "You don't belong here," he muttered. She slid the documents across the table, her voice even. "According to this, I belong exactly here." A heavy pause followed as William skimmed the papers. The atmosphere thickened. Elizabeth's fingers drummed a quiet rhythm on the table. Jasmine's calmness unnerved them. "We weren't made aware of this change in leadership," William said, his tone professional but tinged with anxiety. "You are now," Jasmine replied, her gaze unwavering. The room hadn't yet settled when the door flung open. Robert entered, late, breathless, his tie askew. His eyes scanned the room, locking onto Jasmine like a predator stunned to find its prey unflinching. "This is a hostile takeover," he snarled. "No," Jasmine said, her voice slicing through the tension. "This is a correction." Robert's fists clenched. He stormed toward the table, slamming his hand against the polished wood. "You don't have the experience, but I have the authority," Jasmine replied, sliding a second document forward. "And starting today, every transaction over $10,000 requires my approval." Ryan's facade cracked. "You think you can run this place better than Dad?" Jasmine's eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "Considering you've been using company funds to pay off your poker debts, yes, I think I have a decent shot." A collective gasp rippled through the boardroom. Whispered exchanges erupted as phones appeared discreetly beneath the table. Robert's face paled, his composure unraveling. "This isn't about power," Jasmine continued. "It's about transparency. Something this company hasn't seen since Grandma stepped down." William cleared his throat, eyes betraying a hint of admiration. "She always said you were the one who asked the real questions." "She taught me well," Jasmine said, a faint smile curving her lips. When the meeting adjourned, most members exited swiftly, heads down, voices hushed. But Robert lingered, following Jasmine into the corridor. "You're doing this?" he asked, his tone a blend of disbelief and veiled threat. "You already did," Jasmine responded, "when you decided I was disposable." For the first time, Robert looked defeated. His posture sagged, the weight of his actions settling in. "You regret this," he said. Jasmine paused, turning to face him fully. "No, Dad, I regretted trusting you. This is the cure." By the afternoon, Jasmine had summoned the audit team. She began with Ryan's accounts, methodically exposing shell companies and fandom transactions. Every document she uncovered was another thread pulled from a carefully constructed facade. The evidence was undeniable. What began as suspicion evolved into a comprehensive map of deceit. Ryan's debts were masked under consultancy fees. Susan's advisory roles siphoned funds into offshore accounts. Robert's strategic losses disguised as company investments. As evening fell, the office emptied, but Jasmine remained, surrounded by files that chronicled years of betrayal. She sent the compiled evidence to the legal team, attaching a single subject line. Proceed. Later that night, Ryan appeared at the office unannounced. His face was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot, a stark contrast to his usual polished exterior. "You're going to ruin our lives," he spat, voice trembling. Jasmine didn't look up from her screen. "You did that yourselves. I'm just holding up the mirror." He leaned in, desperation lacing his words. "You think this makes you a hero? You're tearing your family apart." Jasmine stood slowly, her presence formidable. Family doesn't build empires on lies. Family doesn't erase you and call it loyalty. Ryan's composure crumbled. His bravado collapsed into a desperate plea. "You don't have to do this." "I don't have to," Jasmine said. "I want to." Ryan's departure was silent, his defeat palpable. Minutes later, Jasmine's attorney called. "We're ready to file criminal charges. Do you want to proceed?" Jasmine walked to the office window, staring at the illuminated company logo, once a symbol of pride, now a monument to deception. "Yes," she said. "No settlements, no silence. We do it by the book. I want the truth in ink." The next morning, the company website reflected a new chapter. Jasmine's photo, her mission, and her name now graced the leadership tab. Beneath it, a quote from Eleanor stood as a quiet anthem. "If you can't trust the foundation, tear it out and start again." But the battle was far from over. The real confrontation was still ahead. As Jasmine prepared for what lay next, she knew the storm was only beginning to form. The uprising had begun, but the reckoning was still to come. The courtroom's silence was suffocating, the kind that didn't need a gavel to command attention. Jasmine stood tall, her tailored suit a stark contrast to the nervous whispers rippling through the gallery. She wasn't just fighting for her inheritance anymore. This was about dignity, about pulling back the curtain on years of manipulation. Her parents sat together, Robert rigid with clenched fists, Susan composed with a brittle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Emily, her sister, looked like she had aged decades overnight. Their masks were cracking, but Jasmine knew the real unveiling was yet to come. The judge called her name. She rose, each step to the witness stand measured and unshaken. Raising her hand, she swore an oath not just to the court, but to herself. No more silence. No more shrinking. Jasmine's testimony began with the timelines, the shell accounts, the forged documents, the fandom consulting gigs. The courtroom's energy shifted with every piece of evidence projected onto the screen. Each transfer, each fake invoice, each manipulated contract was another stone in the fortress of deceit her family had built. When Jasmine presented the flash drive Eleanor had left her, a hushed ripple passed through the crowd. The judge allowed the recording. Eleanor's voice filled the room, calm but resolute. "Jasmine, if they try to shut you out, don't let them. You're this family's future, not their version of it. Yours." The impact was immediate. Robert's composure faltered, his fingers twitching. Susan's lips pursed tighter. Emily's eyes welled, though no tears fell. The courtroom had shifted. The narrative was no longer theirs to spin. When Susan took the stand, she delivered her defense with the grace of a seasoned politician. She painted Jasmine as sensitive, emotional, and well-equipped for leadership. Jasmine smiled, not in mockery but in recognition. The same script, recycled and worn. "So you believe excluding Jasmine from financial discussions was in her best interest?" the prosecution asked. "Absolutely. She's always been too emotional. She'd let sentiment cloud judgment." Jasmine's rebuttal was simple. She requested the court to pull financial audits of Susan's consulting firms, revealing extensive transfers to personal offshore accounts. Was sentiment the reason for these transactions as well? Jasmine asked how Melissa's face hardened, but the courtroom's attention had already shifted. The truth was undeniable. Robert's defense was brittle. He spoke of legacy, of duty, of protecting the company from Jasmine's inexperience. But Jasmine dismantled his argument by presenting company memos where her strategic suggestions had been implemented without credit, yielding significant profits. Every attempt to undermine her backfired, exposing the rot beneath their polished. Facadecimale's testimony was the quietest, her voice barely rising above a whisper. She admitted to forging signatures, to transferring funds, to following orders out of fear. She tried to apologize mid-testimony, but Jasmine didn't react. She wasn't there for apologies. She was there for accountability. When the closing arguments concluded, the courtroom was a battlefield littered with the debris of lies. The judge's verdict was swift. Jasmine retained full control of Johnson Industries. Robert and Susan were permanently removed from all fiduciary roles. Emily was ordered to pay restitution for unauthorized transactions. The media storm outside was relentless. Reporters shouted questions as Jasmine exited the courthouse, but she didn't stop. Their narratives didn't define her journey that evening. Jasmine returned to the lake house. The quietness was different now. It wasn't emptiness. It was reclamation. She opened Eleanor's cedar chest, placed the court's verdict next to her grandmother's journal, and closed the lid gently. No speeches, no victory celebrations, just the quiet act of honoring truth. Next morning, Jasmine convened a company-wide meeting. Employees filled the auditorium, their faces a mix of curiosity and cautious hope. I won't pretend the past didn't happen, Jasmine began. But starting today, Johnson Industries will be built on transparency. We owe that to ourselves and to the legacy of those who came before us with integrity. Her words resonated, not as corporate jargon but as a pledge. She announced the formation of an internal oversight committee, staffed by employees from every level of the company. She introduced programs for whistleblower protection and profit-sharing initiatives for long-term staff. As the applause echoed, Jasmine felt something settle within her. Not victory, not revenge, but clarity. That night, alone on the lake house porch, Jasmine opened Eleanor's journal to a page marked with a faded ribbon. Sometimes blood must be drained for a body to heal. Families are no different. Jasmine traced the words with her fingertip. They had tried to bury her. They had called her weak, emotional, a burden. But every time they erased her, they had sharpened her resolve. Every silence they forced had become a sentence she would one day speak aloud. The reckoning wasn't an end. It was a beginning. And Jasmine was no longer afraid of the echoes her truth would leave behind. The foundation was hers now, brick by brick, name by name. Weeks following the courtroom victory were a whirlwind of signatures, strategy meetings, and cautious alliances. Jasmine moved through it all with a calm precision. She knew the weight of what she had inherited wasn't just financial. It was the restoration of a name, the repair of a trust long fractured. But the storm hadn't passed. It had merely changed forms. First sign came in the form of a thin envelope, slipped under the door of her office. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper with 5 words typed neatly in the center. Everything crumbles, even the truth. Jasmine's grip tightened, but she didn't react. Threats disguised as wisdom didn't scare her anymore. She had already walked through the fire, but she also knew better than to dismiss such warnings. She had learned that power doesn't vanish. Queetlish tasked the company's security team with a quiet investigation. No public statements, no panic. Johnson Industries was being watched by those who had lost control and those who feared what transparency might expose. In boardrooms, Jasmine continued her quiet revolution. She replaced consultants who had been complicit in the family's schemes with industry veterans known for their integrity. She instituted bi-monthly financial audits, made employee stock options mandatory for executives, and brought back several of Eleanor's old policies that had once made the company a community. Not just a corporation. Some resisted, others quit. But the foundation held late one evening, while reviewing legal documents in the office Eleanor had once occupied. Jasmine received an unexpected visitor. Emily stood at the threshold, hesitant, a shadow of the sister she once was. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything," Emily said, "but I needed to see you." Jasmine gestured for her to sit, but didn't offer comfort. She had learned that bridges rebuilt too quickly collapse under weight. "I didn't come to apologize," Emily continued, voice trembling. "I came to explain." Jasmine listened. Emily spoke. Of years living under Robert and Susan's expectations, of the quiet conditioning that taught her compliance was survival. She admitted to envying Jasmine's defiance but fearing its consequences. "I knew what I was doing was wrong," Emily confessed. "But every time I tried to speak, their voices were louder in my head. I wanted out, but I didn't know how." Jasmine remained silent, allowing the truth to sit between them without interruption. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Emily said. "I'm asking for a chance to earn it." Jasmine nodded once. "You'll start from the ground up. No titles, no privileges." Emily accepted without protest. Over the next few months, Jasmine watched her sister with a cautious eye. Emily took on a junior analyst role, arriving early, staying late, and most importantly remaining quiet when credit was given. She didn't seek attention. She sought redemption. Meanwhile, the threats escalated. Anonymous tips to journalists alleging financial improprieties. Mysterious system glitches that conveniently targeted the newly implemented transparency protocols. But every attempt to destabilize was met with Jasmine's relentless resolve. The turning point came when the Financial Oversight Committee uncovered a dormant account linked to one of Robert's former associates. It held just enough to indicate a slush fund, a war chest designed for influence and retaliation. Jasmine made a choice that afternoon. She could quietly dismantle it, cover it up, and avoid another media circus. Or she could expose it, risking another wave of public scrutiny. Show's exposure press conference was scheduled. Jasmine stood before the podium, a wall of cameras aimed at her, their lenses like eyes waiting for a crack. "Today isn't about scandal," she began. "It's about accountability. Johnson Industries will no longer bury mistakes. We will face them, fix them, and learn from them. Transparency is not a campaign, it's a culture." The statement went viral. Some praised her courage, others questioned her motives. But Jasmine wasn't chasing applause. She was building a foundation. That evening, as she walked through the now quiet offices, Jasmine felt a shift, not in the world's perception, but in her own. She wasn't the girl standing outside her father's study anymore. She wasn't the invisible hand behind the scenes. She was here, visible, heard, and in control. At the lake house, the air felt crisper. Autumn had painted the trees with colors that spoke of endings and beginnings. Jasmine opened Eleanor's cedar chest one last time. She added the final audit report, the press clippings, and a personal note. "Legacy isn't inherited, it's built. And I'm not finished." She closed the lid and left it at the foot of Eleanor's old rocking chair. Later that night, as the moonlight spilled onto the porch, Jasmine sat with a cup of tea, the wind carrying no whispers of betrayal. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. They had tried to bury her, but they had only planted her deeper, stronger. She had reclaimed the family name, but more importantly, she had redefined it. The legacy was hers now, and it was built on truth. Silence wasn't the end, it was the beginning.